my analogy is like it's using the dark side of the force as opposed to the light side of the force. And the dark side of the force is very powerful. You can do great things with it.
A lot of other people that money gives them this artificial sense of control, that a date of retiring at 65 and working towards it gives you the illusion of control towards this retirement.
That could also be influence or persuasion. And if I can manipulate somebody, I don't think that word by itself is light or dark. It's what I do with it at the end of the day.
Welcome to Money Mavericks, the podcast where we explore the dynamic world of finance, investment, and entrepreneurship.
I'm Kirk Drake.
And I'm Daryl Hicks. Together, we're here to bring you the latest insights, expert opinions from the trailblazers who are redefining success in the financial world. Welcome, another episode of the Money Mavericks. Kirk and I are super stoked with the guest that we've got this week. Derek Coburn coming to us live from Washington, D.C. How you doing, buddy?
What's up, boys? Hey, Daryl. Hey, Kirk. So excited to be here with you.
Awesome to have you.
It's been a long time coming. We were kind of talking about this in the preamble before the recording. A lot of the guests that we've had so far are people that come from deep in Kirk's network that he knows a little bit better, or deep in my network who I know a little better. I think you might be the first guest we get on where we both consider you to be a very dear friend and a brother from another mother. So really excited for this conversation. But
Surprisingly,
obviously for all the people listening in who, go ahead. What'd you say, Kirk?
It's surprisingly difficult to get on both.
Yeah.
True. But yeah, we made it happen. It's good. Yeah. So for those of you who don't know the epic human that is Derek Coburn, would love if you would give kind of a high level of your background, what it is that you're up to now and how you ended there. Give us a little bit of the walkthrough of your origin story, if you don't mind.
Sure. So I became a financial advisor right out of college in 1998. Ran my wealth management practice for about 10 years or so. I was qualifying for all the big fancy trips that one could qualify for, working for a big insurance company. And I found myself on these Four-Season-esque boats in the middle of the Mediterranean, talking to guys who were 10, 15, 20 years older than me, asking them what made them successful. And, I was finding a common thread, which was that most of them had 2,000, 3,000 clients, and they only liked working with about 20% of them. And as maybe your audience is probably more familiar with this than most, the red tape, the compliance, the regulations that I had in place that prevented me from really marketing the way that I would have liked to have been able to market, regulated financial advisors, especially at that time, to just like getting referrals. Like you couldn't really do social media marketing. You couldn't write blogs. You still can't have endorsements or testimonials from people. And the internet was really taking off. And, I was reading a lot of books that were getting me excited about word of mouth marketing. And so I basically got rid of about 80% of my clients, went down to about 75 clients, used the time. And we could talk a little bit more about how I built that up if you want to, but use the spare time that I had now to start Cadre, an organization that both of you are members of, for CEOs and entrepreneurs, and bringing people together. And I got really good at figuring out how to bring people together, how to create the environments and the situations to allow people to meet and connect in a meaningful way. And that was a big part of my strategy for growing my wealth management practice before I trimmed it down some. So, that was in 2011. And, I'm skipping over some things, but just in the interest of time, and we can go wherever you guys want to go with this. But I just published a book called Let's Retire Retirement that I started in 2017. I put away for about 5 or 6 years and then came back to it and finished it. And it's really what I've been talking about with clients for 25 years. And it's a conversation that not very many, if any, financial advisors I knew of were having. And that is not asking people what age do you want to retire, but do you even want to retire at all? And, I think that we're all subconsciously buying into this idea that we need to save a certain amount of money by a certain age and make sacrifices in order to make it happen. And we're seeing that a lot of people, once they get there, they're not happy. They're going back to work for a variety of reasons, and they can't get that time back. And I think people are sacrificing their health, their happiness, their key relationships in the name of being able to stop doing something at some point. And I want people to realize that they're probably going to work longer than what they're currently thinking. And because of that, they don't have to save as much money. That means that they all of a sudden have more time and more money that they get to spend on the people and things that are most important to them right now. So that's kind of what I'm really, really excited about.
I think that's amazing. I think it's a a really great message born from a tremendous amount of experience. I want to give just a shout out to what you built in Cadre. I've been a bit of a mastermind junkie for a while. I love connecting in with fellow CEOs and especially founders, entrepreneurs. Like the founders are my tribe for sure.
Yep.
They're my jam, but not all these masterminds are created equally. And the ones that are really nearest and dearest to my heart, where I've met the most amazing people, are the ones that are run by someone who really understands curation. And I think your superpower, from my perspective, is really being able to see people. You're genuinely curious. You really dig into people, but you see them for almost like I remember our first interactions driving around in New York City in a cab cutting through Central Park. And it was like the things that you were telling me about myself very early on, it was almost like blunt and abrupt. And I'm like, oh my goodness, who is this person? Like we just met and he's like seeing right through me. It was like almost a little bit uncomfortable, but you've got a real God-given gift for being able to see people and pick really, really wonderful people to bring together. And Cadre is, you know, even though I'm all the way up in the West Coast and you guys are primarily, you know, East Coast focused in DC, it's still one of the few masterminds that I just can't ever give up because I know the collection of humans you brought together in it is really, really special. So it's this interesting juxtaposition because, you know, this is the Money Mavericks podcast and Kirk and I were excited to have you come in. You've got a ton of experience that comes from building up your wealth management practice and all the best practices along that. I'd love to kind of chat about that a little bit later, but there's this whole other side of Derek Coburn with this incredible mastermind that you've built. It sounds like there was a little bit of motivation, like maybe you're going to end up with, you know, a broader network and word of mouth, and that's going to turn into clients for your business. But I kind of feel like there was something else going on in there as well that really moved you to start up Cadre and turn it into what it is today. Can you maybe unpack that a little bit for us?
Sure. I mean, look, it's the classic, like there was not something that I wanted or needed for myself and my business in the market. So I created it. Like I was joining a bunch of different networking groups and I built my wealth management practice and became successful in large part due to 500 cold calls a week for the first 6, 7, 8 years of my business. And then once I graduated to a place where I could go to networking events, I was like, well, these things are not really that good of a use of my time. Like the people that I want to meet are not here. It's a bunch of people that are slinging business cards and looking to make deals. And so I realized that like by hosting and curating smaller events, I could meet more of the types of people that I wanted to meet than by going to the bigger events. And that's kind of why I wrote a book in 2014 called Networking is Not Working. And, you know, the book, it was more of a client acquisition strategy book where I would leverage client acquisition or client appreciation as a client acquisition strategy to get more clients disguised as a networking book. Because I think some people bought that book and were like, they thought they were going to get advice for how to more effectively network at the big events. And I was page 1, chapter 1, like just stop going to these things because they're not that good of a use of your time for the most part. And so, you know, I joined these other networking organizations. There was one that I even paid like $30,000 to be a part of, thinking surely people will really show up and be focused on how they can add value for other people and play a longer game if they can afford 30 grand to be part of a networking group. But it was almost just the opposite. It was almost like the clock started running. If we don't figure out a way to make $30,000, then this was not a good use of our money. And it just flied in the face of the idea of collaboration. And so Cadre was initially, and even though it's changed a lot, it still is very much this idea that we want to bring people together who can show up because they're successful enough already. They can show up, focus on how they can add value for other people over what they're going to get out of it.
Yeah, I've seen some things within Cadre. You were looking wealth management practice. You were looking at these really high quality relationships, right? And then as you start looking at retirement planning and that piece, that key relationship piece of it continues as a theme, you know, between all three of these things, right? Cadre, private wealth management, and now the retirement. What if you were to kind of like take a step back and plot that out and go, how does this book complete the cycle, or is this just one more step in that broader picture of how important community and connection is in that equation?
Yeah, I think community and connection are part of it. I think that I cover a lot of other things in the book as well. But I think it's also, and Daryl, like probably that conversation that we were having in the taxi in New York City, it's just like my desire and my ability, I think, in a lot of cases to just really help people see what they're capable of in a way that maybe they're not even able to see it sometimes. And just an ability to just kind of help people like catapult into that place. And so, I think that the book that with my wealth management practice and with Cadre, it appealed to a certain type of person that had a certain amount of money, that had a certain amount of wealth. And when I started writing the book in 2017, I wanted it to be almost like a business card to attract more wealth management clients. And then I was approached in 2018, somewhat out of the blue, by a private equity company looking to buy my practice. And I sold the practice in 2019, had the earn out over 3 years. And I didn't touch the book the entire time. It was probably 4 or 5 years. COVID happened. My dad passed away. I was living a lot of the principles of what I talk about in the book by spending a lot of time with my kids and my wife and really getting myself right and having my midlife crisis and getting over that. And then when I went to revisit the book, I said, well, look, I don't need to get anything out of it now. And I actually don't want to use it as a tool to attract more clients. I don't want to grow my wealth management practice. So I'm in a spot now where I can write a book that can help out a lot more people than just maybe the people that would have had the minimum asset level that would have been a good fit to be a client for me 5 years ago.
On Money Mavericks, we don't just talk about making money. We explore the innovative strategies and bold decisions that drive real change. Whether you're an experienced investor, a budding entrepreneur, or just someone looking to make smarter financial choices, we've got something for you.
Every week, we're going to sit down with industry leaders, visionaries, and mavericks who share their journeys, challenges, and breakthroughs, from contrarian views on market trends to the secrets behind building a successful startup. You get an inside look at what it takes to thrive in today's economy.
And we promise to keep it real, engaging, and most importantly, actionable. No jargon, no fluff. Just straightforward conversations that you can apply to your own financial journey.
So get ready to challenge your thinking, expand your knowledge, and take control of your financial future. This is Money Mavericks,
where we turn financial dreams into realities and mavericks into legends. So I think in that vein, I really like, you played this role for me a couple times in my career, rid of my kind of baker suit, encouraged me to lean into my humor more. And then, I think even more recently thinking about how to connect the dots between Cook Drake and CU2 and the winery and some of those things. And so I know you played that role a couple of times. I also know in my mind from a very early age, from 11 or 12, I was very fixated on solving for financial stability. And I wasn't looking at like retire by 65, but it was retire by 40, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So for pretty much the age, from 13, 14, I started working, started saving money, started grinding it out with the idea that by the time I would be 40, I could just not have to worry about that aspect at all. And then, of course, I had 3 kids in 15 months, which completely destroyed any belief for financial planning. But I'd love to hear how, go back in time to having a conversation with me as 14-year-old Kirk, right? And saying, how would you reframe that conversation with this book today?
With 14-year-old Kirk, I'd be like, why are you even thinking about this stuff? Go have fun, man. Go join a soccer team. And what are you thinking about money for, man? I have a 15-year-old right now. And so we'll talk about it a little bit, but one of the things I talk about, in the last chapter of my book, it's not what my book's about, but it's one of the ideas that I present. And that is, I think that we're in the midst of a fun recession right now that I think 99% of adults are not even coming close to having an appropriate amount of fun. The experience that you guys had last weekend, right? That is an amount of fun that the majority of adults are just not ever going to come close to having for the rest of their life. And so for my kids wake up every day and they're like, who am I going to have fun with today? And what am I going to do? And so I don't know, maybe I'll give you a better answer if I can have a conversation with 24-year-old Kirk, but 14-year-old Kirk, come on, man. I want to learn from you. I want to have a better time.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I think that so first of all, I don't at all feel like I deprived myself in my childhood of having fun.
Okay.
However, I definitely, if the choice was, work at Taco Bell and screw around or start the student bank, right, and not date for a year because I'm running the student bank, I chose the student bank route. When I got to college, it was have a job and go to school, skip the parties at college. And a lot of that for me was very much driven from scarcity and fear because my parents were so delinquent with their toy train collecting and, addiction and other stuff. And so most of that was a reaction to wanting to feel like I had control. And I'm guessing there's a lot of other people that money gives them this artificial sense of control that a date of retiring at 65 and working towards that gives you the illusion of control towards this retirement. And that when you get to retirement, you're going to have this time and flexibility and you get to control your life, which I think is a complete fallacy, right? But I think your book exposes that in some different ways, right? And I'd love to hear that. So that's what I was saying when what would you say to that 14-year-old of like this illusion of control by working really hard and skipping these things? All that really means it's a different side of that coin that doesn't necessarily get you where you want.
Yeah, look, I think like my book is to a large extent, it's a call to return to some balance. It's a reminder to a lot of people that are just head down focused on having a certain number by a certain age that like, you should probably take your wife out on a date every once in a while. You should probably show up for family dinners more often. You should probably go to the gym a little bit more than what you're currently doing. And I think there's a lot of people that need to hear that message. If there's one demographic that doesn't need to hear that message and that I'm not interested in really pushing hard on it, it's like the early to mid 20s or late 20s, because I think that like a lot of the amazing things that I have in my life right now stem from the fact that I was working 70 to 80 hours a week for 7-8 years when I first started off. And I'm not sure that there's a better way to spend your time. And look, and it was for me, like you, man, it was driven by past traumas. It was driven by the need to prove people wrong. And while I'm glad I've unwound that to a large extent right now, like it served me really well. And I've got a lot of amazing stuff to show for that. And so now the flip side of this is the FIRE movement. Are you guys familiar with the FIRE movement? So the FIRE movement, this financial independence, retire early, where like the buy-in is you're supposed to do something while you're here in this life that you don't enjoy, that is not going to fulfill you. And you should figure out a way to get out of having to do that thing as soon as possible so that you can then earn the right to not have to do anything at all after that. And I know that maybe that's like an oversimplification of it, but at the same time, like why are we just like going along with this idea that work is supposed to be something that we don't love, that we don't enjoy, that we're not going to want to retire from at some point because it fills us up so much and it provides so much value for the people that we're working with.
Yeah. I think this idea of being fueled from a place of scarcity. I mean, I've met a lot of founders now, probably not as many as you have, Derek, especially running Cadre, but the common theme, and you and I've talked about this before, with most founders and entrepreneurs is that they're usually starting from a place of having something to prove, either to themselves or to someone else. And, fear, guilt, anger, these are really, really powerful fuels that can just power you through to do incredible things. The challenge is when you use that, my analogy, like I'm a Star Wars geek, and my analogy is like it's using the dark side of the Force as opposed to the light side of the Force. And the dark side of the Force is very powerful. You can do great things with it. But long term, if that's your primary fuel through most of your life, it's going to lead to a lack of balance. It's going to lead to you making compromises and sacrifices that will bite you in the long term. Because when you're fueled from that place of scarcity, you'll sacrifice your health in pursuit of that career or that business or whatever. You'll sacrifice your family. You'll sacrifice relationships with your kids. You'll sacrifice, integrity, a lot of different things that can be sacrificed. Whereas, the really interesting transition is that, even though just about every single founder I know, with very few exceptions, we're fueled from this place of like having to prove something to someone along the way. The ones that I'm closest to and who I enjoy spending time with the most are the ones that are now fueled by the light side of the Force, which is a place of abundance, of being motivated by love and by joy, and just out of this desire to see how far can we go? How great can I truly become? If I get to test myself against the market, can I go build something awesome? And how great would it be, right? It's subtle, but it's a very, very different kind of energy. But I feel like we almost, I don't know if we have to come from like starting to that piece. Like when you were talking about like what you do in your 20s, and how important it is to just get out there and work 70 or 80 hours a week. I think there's a lot of truth in that. And a lot of what pushes you to make those kinds of sacrifices is that hunger, that dark side of the force kind of hunger, right? Or am I wrong on that?
Maybe, look, I mean, I think I think that saying that it was bad, I think net, it was mostly good. Like, I didn't use the power, the force to do harm to anybody. I might have been like messing with my central nervous system more. And I got to a point where after 30 years of feeling like I need to have that energy or carry that energy in me, that I couldn't do it anymore. But I think, like, just take the word like manipulation, for example, right? Like, that could also be influence or persuasion. And if I can manipulate somebody, I don't think that word by itself is light or dark. It's what I do with it at the end of the day. And I think for me, the problem was I was waking up after I had the sale of my practice, after I sort of like won the game that most of us are playing. And I got to step back and say, what game do I want to play now? And realize that, like, okay, I'm waking up looking for an adversary. Who am I going to prove wrong today? And this isn't like a way to live, and I don't want to do this. And the book that I wrote came from a very pure place and a very good place. And the result of getting really clean and giving up the addictions. When I say addictions, like, I wasn't an alcoholic, but I was addicted to having a glass of wine or two every single night as a way to relax and unwind at the end of the day. I was addicted to having nicotine every hour or two as a way to stay in flow. And I said, well, what would it look like if I tried to no longer have to need anyone or anything in order to feel a certain way? And I don't recommend quitting everything at once like I did, but I did that and I got to a pretty good place. And I will say that I when you are at this place that I'm at now, which is I'm not running off of looking to prove anybody wrong. I'm not looking I don't have any past traumas that are carrying me around. I don't know, man. Maybe I could use a little bit of that. I don't know.
I think there's like a really good point in there, which is I think that dark energy leads to burnout. And if you're focused on the right energy and you're looking at, okay, I want to spend 80 hours, but I'm going to constantly be calling this for things that I have special gifts for, that I really enjoy, and I'm moving it, then it starts being accretive and not draining, right? And then you don't have to fear burnout. One of the things you talk about in the book is the rule of, retiring at 65. Walk us through where that came from, the history, the nonsense.
So it started in 1889 in Germany while they were putting together the first ever social retirement type plan. And the chancellor was Otto von Bismarck, and he picked the age of 65 because that was the age that people were expected to live until. So, hey, like, let's take the average age of death and make that the age that we'll start paying people out. And that they raised it to 70 about 10 years later, but FDR putting together the Social Security Act in 1935 thought 65 sounded like a good number. And at the time, like, if we were to play it out, somebody that was getting Social Security in like 1945, let's say, you would get a third of what you needed to live on from Social Security. You would get a third of what you need to live on from a pension plan. And those don't really exist for most people anymore. And then you would have to come up with like the final third for yourself for a period of like 6 or 7 years because you were going to die at 72. And so the age of 65, and now some people will call it 67 but I think most people still associate 65 with being the age that you retire, has never been adjusted to keep up with how much life expectancy has increased over the past, 100 or so years. And again, like, I don't think that we were put on this earth to do something that we don't enjoy for 30 years, to earn the right to sit around and not have to do anything at all after that for another 30 years.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Money Mavericks. We hope you found it insightful and inspiring.
Don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And be sure to share this episode with someone who needs to hear it.
Stay connected with us on social media and visit our website for exclusive resources, episode transcripts, and more.
Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries, making smart moves, and turning your financial dreams into realities.
You've been listening to Money Mavericks, where Mavericks become legends.